Okay, so this this presentation here, it's like I've been thinking about how to apply STP theory to the political organizing that I've been participating in the last years, and like a question that was very important that that became important over the years. I think for pretty much everything that I've been doing the last 10 years is like when we organize politically, when we try to like uh, turn us, we we do like and take a situation that is like in a conservative situation and try to intervene politically. The answer that comes like almost like automatically, it's like let's do a newspaper, let's do a Facebook page, a Facebook group, an Instagram, make videos and share in WhatsApp. So I was thinking like, why did that form of political intervention become like so widespread and like common sense among certain militant cultures? And uh, what why I was wondering if that tendency of like relying a bit much increasingly more in social networks or social platforms, what impact did it have in an organizational perspective? So I did like a bit of a weird movement because I thought like I feel like um, uh, a lot of, especially among the newer generations of militants since 2010 and so, that's like immediately publicizing everything that is being done is a form of making it exist and ensuring that it can be reproduced because people will see and like, and maybe they will come to the organization and whatever. And I started thinking like, what did people do when the opposite was true? When a condition for the survival of the political activity was that it was not publicized. Uh, and I thought maybe starting from that condition and trying to like see what's different could help think maybe uh, and develop some categories. But it's like it was very. I decided to do this presentation in, like this because I wanted to help. Well, I wanted some help in developing the concepts and see if like this speculation makes sense. So secrecy, that deixa eu ver aqui, all the deixa eu- so I took this text of João Bernardo. He's a Portuguese militant who is behind Passa Palavra and has like a developed a theory of self-management. And I thought this text was very interesting because uh, it, it focuses a bit on like the infrastructure aspect of trying to organize secretly in a way that we maybe could generalize and try to understand a bit better. So I'll read a bit here. He was a militant in Portugal in the 70s. So it was the Salazarist regime, a fascist regime that had a very large political police and whatnot. So let me read here. So when I started my militant activity, the fascist regime was 36 years old. During that time, he created a colossal network of informers, spies, and agent provocateurs. If I wrote colossal, it wasn't figure style, it was a realistic adjective. In every cafe, in every restaurant, in every brewery, in every public place, there was at least one political police informer, sometimes more. Public transport operations were often farmers, as were taxi drivers. In addition, there were prisons and torture to try to force the prisoners to confess his activities and denounce the activities of his comrades. That was what was in our minds from the first moment we started a militant activity. We never forgot it, we never forget the way we lived, how we acted, the internal structures of political organization, the self-discipline we learned to have, all these obeyed a constant concern, that is, of preserving the necessary conditions of our activity. This means, in simple terms, that the streets and squares were not neutral ground. We had to build our terrain. We had to organize the networks of clandestine points of support where the printers and copyographers were hiding. We had to organize the ways of obtaining these machines, a system in which their acquisition was severely controlled by the political police. We had to organize the way of obtaining the paper and ink suitable for printing in a system where their acquisition was also supervised by the political police. We had to organize the distribution where in a system where it was forbidden to sell the paper and the ink, and the post office was controlled by the political police too. So we had to set up a network of support points that allowed clandestine militants to hide for days or months or years. So we had to get false documentation. So I think the important is this part I like. I forgot the verb.
You can call for dictionary help if needed in Portuguese if you want.
I like que eu negritei aqui.
Highlight.
Yeah, I highlight this part here because it's like I feel like when we are like organizing and thinking in terms of social platforms, it's like this whole thing of like material distribution and it's sort of outsourced to private companies that we do not have control over. But I thought it was a good like decomposition of what it means to do political work by printing and distributing materials. So I think it's like a good and the secrecy part. I think it's like it's not a matter of like not being seen or no, because if it was like that, if people wanted no one to know about anything, they could stay alone, but they had to let the right people know, and they had to make a way so the wrong people wouldn't know. So organizing meant making that distinction, and like if the wrong people would know, it would have negative consequences. But if the right people would know, you could effectively organize. So it's like the address of the communication was, I think, more well thought out, because it could the person you could be delivering a paper or a pamphlet to, you had to consider if the person was a police. So it was like an offside benefit of repression. So that's not new, and it was not invented by João Bernardo. It was like Lenin in Where to Begin and What to Do in 1901 and 1903. He thought about this, like the role of the newspaper as an organizer. So, and he would also talk about this infrastructural aspect of communication activity. That was the mere technical task of regularly supplying the newspaper with copy and promoting regular distribution will necessitate a network of local agents of the United Party. Who will
Can you
maintain
move the slide to the next page? I think it's on the, or is it just for me?
It didn't change?
At least for, now it did. Sorry.
No, okay. Why? Now it's the Delaney text?
Yeah, for me it's the Lenin now.
Okay.
Yeah, same here. It's the Lenin text.
Sorry. So first I was like talking about the second paragraph, which like mentioned this technical infrastructural aspect of organization that the paper fulfilled. And in the first, it was like, I think it is a clear manner of speaking of the logistical function of this type of work that is like I'll read a bit. Like a newspaper is not a collective propagandist and a collective agitator. It is also a collective organizer. In this last respect, it may be likened to the scaffolding round a building under construction, which marks the contours of the structures and facilitates communication between the builders, enabling them to distribute the work and to view the common results achieved by the organized labor. With the aid of newspaper and through it, a permanent organization will naturally take shape that will engage not only local activities, but in regular general work, and will train its members to follow political events carefully, appraise their significance and their effect on various strata of population, and develop effective means for the Revolutionary Party to influence these events. So I think I took this text because it's like it's very concise and very clear about this logistical function of the newspaper and why what he likes takes for granted it's not working anymore. So I took this. So before going to the changes in the political infrastructure. Did it change? Okay. So there's like one of the first like big movements that I know of, at least, that use the internet to build like something of a clandestine organization and publicize it constantly, was like the McDonald's workers' resistance. It was a reference to a bit of a group of militants here in Brazil. It was translated Passo Palavra to this interview. And I think it shows that like with the change from printing to internet, I'm not sure if that was the determinant factor, but it happened at the same time, at least. It was possible for people to like distribute and promote content and political positions and whatever, but without it naturally building collective confidence and coordination and developing the means to intervene in political situations. So that's the source of the network of zeros of the title. So I'll read a bit and we can go to the next. So if you have 1,000 contacts, but none of them is able to create a structure in the workplace, then you've got 1,000 times zero, you got nothing. Now, I'm not suggesting that that was necessarily the case with the McDonald's worker resistance. I think there were some inspiring and brave attempts to create structures of resistance amongst workers. But it is a problem adhering to contemporary fashions for organizing. People want to feel they're getting somewhere, and in absence of practically grounded structures, they create networks. And with the internet, you can have a network of anything. You can have a network of laundrette assistants. You can find a few dozen laundrette assistants with anarchist sympathies, one in Helsinki, one in New York, and there's bound to be at least one in Hackney. And you get a feeling of progress, but it's illusionary because 5 million times nothing is still nothing. So I like talked. What's why? What's the difference? Why didn't it translate? Like a newspaper could like reach a couple of hundred people, but that the impact that that newspaper had was like more easy to be felt and as a collective force than something that would reach thousands of people. And I think maybe we can find some sort of answer in this distinction between secrecy and publicization. And I mean, like in democratic societies, and I think over a century of experience of political work, um, I think many people that do political work or even live their lives, they feel like if they do not connect that particular experience to something larger, it may as well not exist. So I think there is like a reminiscence of that necessity of trying to connect the local and private to something larger, but uh, people don't want to feel like no one knows, no one cares about what they do, but it seems like the internet turns invisible the necessary work to build like to make people care about what you do and to connect with in a sense with what you are doing in a way that makes change possible. So I think I'll try to develop that in the case studies. So I so I took like the working through political work text and this diagram, and just so we can remember these concepts. And I was wondering if if like influencing work or political work through social networks is inherently conservative. So I took a few cases of stuff that involved social networks and situations that could have remained private. And I thought maybe by seeing the cases, we could understand a bit how people are thinking about the stuff they do in like political activity in social networks, and like what is being turned invisible by that kind of by that perspective. So I took first like an individual case that is uh, a Taylor Swift in secret. There was like a show, a Taylor Swift show, and a security guard. He was like a huge fan of Taylor Swift, so he printed some papers and asked people to take pictures of him because he, as security guard, could not take a picture of himself. It was like a disciplinary uh, breach to do that. So he asked people in the show to take pictures of him, and like someone like made a video of him uh, singing along with Taylor Swift, and it went viral. And he ended up being fired because he commented on the video that he did that he asked people to take photos of him. like if he only had like viralized or became popular in the internet, but didn't say that he had asked people to, it was like and he was like going against the discipline of the company that hired him. They are prohibited from taking pictures, but they can use pictures. People take them, but they can't like ask people. But what's interesting here is that he himself like gave himself up to the company for like likes and uh, so I think this is a case of like where taking a something that could have remained private public, and that ended up reinforcing the discipline of the company over other workers who could like they see that when you do something that the company doesn't want and someone happens to make a video of you, you can get fired. So it's like that. This is only possible because this type of communication is possible. You can make videos and share without the person knowing and without having a discussion. So that's like one of the cases. Another is like a bit more general. It's uh, no, it's never, actually I would like to think together about this kind of stuff. It's like in the United States, there's a relationship between some big social network profiles like libs of TikTok and others who they share a video about a dragging story in a specific library somewhere, and armed people go there to try to intimidate the drag queen story. So there are like some people that say this is stochastic terrorism because these people who promote these like rage stories, they just share it, and the outrage is like outsourced to other groups who may or may not take it up to do something about it. But there's not, in this case, the disconnection between what is said and what is done is a form of defense for the people who are doing the promotion of the content. Uh, so that's, I think that is one of the possibilities of organizing politically, in this case in a conservative manner. But there is like there isn't only the people who are sharing the stories about the drugging story. There had to be an armed, organized group of people who communicate in ways that are not public that go there. So I think that is an aspect of the thing that becomes more important in the next case. So the January 8th riot in Brasilia, there was like, before the riot, there were like months or years of online agitation saying that the voting machines in Brazil were hacked and unsafe and whatnot. And that involved like millions of people in Telegram and WhatsApp, but it did not like become something that would disrupt the lives of the public or of the people who were involved in the communication. After Lula won the election, there were like encampments organizing in dozens of cities that were connected by the internet, but the scale reduced drastically, and the disruption was like larger too. And after all that happened, the riot in January 8th, that like people from several cities in Brazil took buses to Brasilia and then did a demonstration and invaded the federal buildings. But what I could see here in like analyzing this aspect, at least, it was like the the more necessary disruption of actual things, the smaller the scale, and the more it relied on like analogical organizing rather than digital or social network organizing. Like, I'm not sure if this is the natural way, but what's that? So the last case would be the Courier Stripes WhatsApp group that we wrote about with Behance too. That was like, why did it work to try to organize strikes in WhatsApp groups? There was something that was already happening. The couriers were like already had groups that they used to coordinate and self-organize to survive in the public security of Brazil. Usually, like iFood couriers would make a group, Uber couriers would make another group, and so on. And the WhatsApp groups of the strike, they would unify groups that were not previously connected, like iFood and Uber and Rappi and iFood, and coordinate between particular groups and between different cities, sometimes maybe international political action. And there was like the salves that Treta liked to do about the strikes. They were familiar with specific trends and career aesthetics. So I think the efficacy of these groups was built on, like, there was an analysis of the terrain that permitted it to make it work, and it was related to the form of work that couriers live in and necessitate this intensive use of cell phones and whatnot. So I think that was an important. And so so I like taking these cases into account. I like develop these ideas of secrecy and publicity, and we could be like a conservative secrecy and a conservative publicity would be like a secrecy that involved sensing powerlessness over changing the world. So it's like you want something to be known, but it won't be known because you don't have the attention necessary to make this known. And the unwanted publicity was like by sharing things in a certain manner with certain publics, the constraints increase and do not decrease. So in the opposite would be like a revolutionary secrecy, and the revolutionary publicity would be like, if we manage to connect with the right people without the wrong people knowing, we increase the power to change the world. And I think that's a bit of it's hard to differentiate a bit, like, see, because anyway, so in the case of publicity, it's like when you you take something from a context that is private and make it public, you decrease the power of like bosses and local politicians over this struggle and increase the power to change the world. So in conclusion, it's not really conclusion, but I think that with the internet infrastructure and the social networks and platforms and whatnot, the question of the infrastructure for political work and communication issues is more critical. And so the question that is raised by this is like, what is the determinant mediation? Because does the relationship of you as a producer and the audience depend on like the algorithm only, or on political relationships that you use the algorithm to express in a way that goes beyond what it currently is? I think maybe that is a question that needs to be answered. And because I was thinking that since we do not, we no longer have the means or the experience or the strategies to build the infrastructure, like print the paper, buy the paper, the ink, and whatever. That's not something that is really on the table for us to do. We lost the know-how to do that, most of us. So I think it is not impossible to use social networks and internet platforms to promote political work in a meaningful way. But I think it is necessary to like see if we are not working for the platforms instead of putting them into work for political organization. So that's like the presentation. It was very short, but it's because I realized trying to think about this stuff and that it's harder than I thought to conceptualize and understand what's going on. So I wanted to share what it was like trying to hypothesize and see if you guys thought it made sense to try to think more about it, and you had another perspective about that. So that's it. Thanks.
Yeah, John just asked if we should take a 5-minute break before debating. I'm fine with that. So we come back in 5?
Okay. Did you stop sharing?
Okay.
Or-
No, it's not stop sharing yet. Okay, now it has.
Thanks.
Is everyone here? I think Fernanda needs to leave soon. She said she has to leave at 7. Perhaps if you address her question first.
Okay. So I think they're like, no, it's a good question first. I think there are like the WhatsApp groups that the couriers had normally to like people who want to start working as a courier, they would enter these WhatsApp groups to share experiences and get like tips and it's like what usually it's like an outsourced training. Couriers training themselves so they could have an easier time working. That was like one instance of the WhatsApp group. When the strikes were organized, these groups would like become space of agitation and for people to discuss, and like if there was a break happening in a place, people would share there and they would know there was a break happening in another place too, and if there was like a problem they would like repurpose this conservative group to a political function. So but that depended on stuff that happened in real life, like if people had to meet and decide to do the strike and that kind of stuff. So there was like an ambiguity in these WhatsApp groups, uh, because they could serve like to discipline the workforce for iFood and Uber and what, and they could also be used to connect and coordinate political movements in certain contexts.
Thank you for the answer, Victor. Do you want to say something more, or can I just make a comment? Sorry. Oh, okay. So thank you. I was thinking, because like the workers in the situations like the apps and etc., they have a really intense experience, and they are already connected to some kind of technology, like a web, a rede, how do you say this? A web? No, is this? Yeah, okay. Like a web that the mean of this web is technology, is an app, and I was thinking if this like facilitates this kind of workers to like make this online environment something that they can share their experience and then turn into a real thing and like a real process. Or do you think that this could happen like to other movements? I don't know. I like we see other movements that are like investing in this internet presence. I don't know. But I don't know, it doesn't seem like the same process as the workers from iFood and Uber. I don't know, sorry if there is a like a dumb comment, etc.
I think like I think it's an important aspect, like that makes the intense use for coordination in moments of conflict easier. But I think like the app workers, they have like more experience with like using the technology against itself. So they like use the iFood app, for example, to try to they like to make ways to communicate with the platform in manners that were not expected by the company. So I'm not sure if I'm clear, but I think they have a bit of experience of hacking platforms, so and repurposing them for other means, and like workers with less experience with handling technology, they have more difficulty to using it in a manner that wasn't like conservative as planned by the companies that offer those services.
I have I mean, I wanted to try to contribute with the, you said like you wanted to try to turn this, like to find a use for the diagrams and stuff in this debate. And I just tried something here. I wanted to see what you think, because it's also just a matter of seeing if it helps to, because I feel you mentioned two types of problems. And I just wanted to see if you agree that this is a good schematic and if it helps. Let me just share really quickly. Okay, forgot how to. Okay. So can you guys see this? Here, a lot of arrows. So just to recall, right? You mentioned these two diagrams here for people who don't remember how they are meant to work. They're just trying to differentiate what it means to have something which is conservative and what it means to have something which is political. Then actually Vitor helped us also to make a distinction between two types of political, but just in a bit. So the idea is something is conservative when the way an individual engages with a mediation and the way that mediation engages with the world is pretty much the same as how the individual engages with the world. So the two paths are the same. And something is political when the way you engage with the mediation and with the world through the mediation is different from the way you engage directly with the world. And we made two distinctions here to separate reactionary and progressive or revolutionary, if you want, mediations. If this difference here, right, leads to a bigger world, so we write with a plus. So the world is bigger through the mediation. That's a revolutionary or emancipatory type of mediation. If the world is smaller, it is a reactionary mediation. So you're mapping a smaller world from the bigger world by engaging there, right? So I'm just saying this because I think that you ended up proposing two problems. One that is, to me at least, clearer in the beginning when you talk about the journal, because it's a difference between printed versus online. And the second problem is types of online, right? So I separated the two. Like one is a matter of function, so type functions that the online world can have, WhatsApp, Facebook, and groups and Instagram and so on. And the other is a matter of the determinations and the cost of doing things. Like the cost of doing online is smaller than the cost of, clandestine. It doesn't need to be clandestine, but the fact that João Bernardo's example and Lenning's example was about clandestine shows that it was very costly to do things. Everything costs a lot, like effort. It's not ready. You need to build it, right? So just to start with this first, I feel like, again, using this idea here, right? And just to recall also, there is a complete diagram where if you ask, why is this different? Why is going up different than going below? The idea is that, well, because the political mediation is connected to a political movement. And because it has that commitment, it sometimes creates a different reality than the direct reality of the individual, right? So the first thing I thought is, well, perhaps what you're talking about is this difference. A printed journal is determined by the world in all these ways, like communitarian needs so that you can create your journal, legal means and property, who owns the stuff, who's going to do it, you know, who's responsible. And then there's a cost of time to do things, and you need to take out of your free time to do it, and so on. And the individual's relation to the printed journal repeats all those things. So the printed journal, it passes along to the people who work at the journal all those costs. For example, if it is a clandestine journal, so regarding mode B, it is illegal. If you're working on the printed journal, you're now a criminal. It passes to you, right? Whereas if you're reading online kind of fake news, people cannot charge you for engaging with fake news because you're protected. So the difference that I thought is almost like, for example, online, all these things are determining the mediation behind the back. They're the property of somebody. They do have costs for coders and programmers, and they do have like communities that use them and things like that. But those costs are not passed along to people who engage with them, right? There's something that gets lost. So that's a way to try to logically distinguish, like somehow this path here loses this determination. You no longer see it, where in the printed journal, this thing here passes along here. It doesn't need to be a political thing. It will pass. And well, if you are doing a journal as part of a political movement, the tension between the political movement and the world passes to the tension between the political movement and the journal. It will have to write this rather than that because of what's going on, and it will pass to you as well, right? The fact that users don't absorb cost is what made Twitter vulnerable to buyout. Could you say something, John, about that? I'm not sure if I follow. Like,
oh, I mean, just the fact that it's literally impossible to recover your costs because of the logic you're saying right here. You literally can't build a social network to recover the costs and have it work the way it does right now. So something like Twitter is always going to be vulnerable to like financial instability.
I see. Yeah, but I mean, for example, you could say something. I think the cost I meant here is very, very broad sense of cost, like things that resist you, right? For example, if we just, instead of print a journal,
I get that, but I think that even when you zoom into like more financial costs, this kind of logic ends up playing into the. I see. Yeah. Anyway, that was just a side note.
Yeah, but that's interesting also, because the other thing I thought is, well, what happens is that you get to see in this case a very big tension in this blue thing with the red thing. If you were doing a printed journal about any topic, it would be easier, and it would fit with your life. People will say, oh, you're so nice, you want to be a journalist, that's so cool. But the moment that you're writing pieces and publishing in the printed journal, denouncing not the non-payment of people in the workplace or health hazards or whatever, and building things based on that common sense of injury, suddenly people will say, why are you wasting your life? Like the tension passes along to you. Why are you engaging in something that... So the tension between the blue and the red transmits back to the individual somehow. And therefore, let's say, the more you engage with printing and sharing this journal, you will receive all those things. You're becoming part of all those things, right? Well, for some reason, and I have no idea how we should name this, I just think it's a nice basic way of thinking about social network, that it takes a bunch of arrows and turns into one arrow. And a lot of things that happen online have to do with this. Like, you don't know, what are you responding to? Are you responding to a communitarian problem? I mean, no wonder the left online is constantly filtering. It's a machine to try to decode what is the relevant logic, right? So you say something like, I was really pissed off today at the bus driver. And then people will say, so you're bothered with a person, and then they will say, who are you to complain about a worker? So now it's mode C is the problem. And somebody will say, yeah, but if he's doing his job, he needs to do it properly. Then it's mode B. And you can never settle because things are not cohering because of the logic. They're just cohering because there are words in a platform, right? So everything always coheres on Twitter, for example, because everything is on the same platform. It's logistically guaranteed to be the same. So people can interpret whatever they want. They don't need to create any cohesion in how they interpret things. So it facilitates this thing here of happening where a complex becomes a simple thing. Right? So it seems like this works both ways because it also makes this arrow and this thing easier. Like the political movement's relation to the world is very dense and complex. But if you cannot engage with the political movement normally through Discord, for example, or through WhatsApp, or through WhatsApp, I think is a bit different, but through like social networks, the cost of that engagement also gets flattened because you can choose the easiest way to engage. So if it's easiest to discuss theory, that's what you're going to do. If you're easiest to, watch some videos or to complain about some people or to do this filtering work. So there's something, I'm not sure how to name this, but I feel like there is a difference between these two things, which is relevant to what you were saying and to what Lenin, the point that Lenin and João Bernardo were making, So I'm not sure exactly how to call this, but I would say it's something like this, right? You have like this weird thing where many things come in, and in some mediations allow many things to come out on the other side, and you can use that. You learn something from that. Whereas other mediations, they're like a weird buffering. You have a bunch of stuff here, and it's not like it takes on the very important thing. It just sends on a noisy whatever to you, and that can be more bearable, like simpler, less costly. So this was the first thing I was thinking about. I'm not sure if you guys think it makes sense with the first difference you made, between the Lenin and the journal, because of course it's not a matter of saying, let's go back to printing paper journals. I know that's not your point, but there is something there. I'm not sure if it makes sense. Yeah, Rafael.
This is just like what I was wondering from hearing the discussion, if this could be the case of the inverted diagram, the one where the arrows go the other way.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I was thinking when I was seeing you present that other diagram, and I think it really, at least for me, it really connects with a lot of stuff that I've heard from you, Vitor, especially in your underground investigations into online communities. It seems that instead of the political movement being something, I think this is what a bit of the gist, instead of the communication network mediation being something that you participate in something that is explained from the outside, I think it seems that like instead of the world getting larger, the world gets smaller. This is metaphorical, but I was wondering if it made sense to think it through the inverted diagram, but that's just a thought that arose here.
I just wanted to see, Victor, if you wanted to respond to any of that first before I went on.
No, you can go first.
Okay. Yeah. First off, in terms of your overall thing, I think this is a really good direction for research. I think you're touching on something subtle, which is, I can see why it's like gonna like gum up the attempt to draw nice, neat distinctions and whatnot. Because there are a lot of like overlapping, interesting questions here. One of which is like, Yeah, I think it's really easy to kind of like look at just the computer and the digital as like, you know, the main difference from like media paper to whatnot. But I think that there's a lot of weird other things that tie into that. Like the courier strikes, there's this digital aspect, and then there's this whole other layer of like the logistical reorganization of society. And I think that that plays in weird ways, because back in the day, it was very hard a lot of times to get newspaper equipment, but you could kind of like containerize it. Once you had all the gear, you had to get obviously like perishables, but the actual production system could be like completed and carried around. Whereas the more we get into digital infrastructure, the more you rely on something that'll always be kind of outside of your grasp, and you'll always have to, you know, tap into something that's like I think, unless you have a lot of resources, something that's going to rely on a bigger infrastructure, which changes how you interact with it, including like your vulnerability to the state or whatnot. And I think the recent like buyout of Twitter is interesting and stupid in a lot of ways. But I think one of the questions kind of in light of the framing of your presentation is like, how will this affect what political utility Twitter has had over the years, like its role in disseminating information and mobilization during the Arab Spring, with the Saudis like having invested a lot in the buyout. That's an open question. So I think like we could be in an interesting point of history where like, and similarly in the US, Republicans are trying to ban TikTok. So this is all to say like we could be in a time when we won't be able to rely as much on certain large toolings, and we would have to kind of go back to something that's we can autonomously control, which is possible. I mean, you can set up servers and there's a lot of tools for that, but I think that that's something that would require a lot of logistics. The other thing that strikes me about the difference is like the newspaper system also was like kind of in our sense in STP like an organization that superseded like the individuals and how it functioned, right? Like you had to have all these different people in different places just to make any little underground printing operation work. But the way that like social media works nowadays is like one person, even if they're not trying to like make it about them, even if they're running some anonymous page that you never know their name, like the entire kind of domain of producing content can be under one person. So there's a way that like the labor is already very atomized in computer production that I think plays a really big role too. So that was kind of rambly, but that was all to say that I think that you're hitting on something interesting, and I would definitely want to see where you go with it.
Vitor, go before me anyway. I raised my hand too many times.
Okay, first, I think there was something that I even talked to Gabriel about it, but I forgot to place it. It's like in the case of the courier strike, for example, there is like this reality of restructuring of work, and there's also something like this phenomena of like for some people it can be like something that is worth it for you to do, but even if like a collective doesn't get anything out of it. For example, there are a few like liberal professionals that become famous because they post something that Bolsonaro people hate, and they like try to lynch that person online, and she becomes famous, and I don't know, there's like a couple of doctors that get a lot of clients because they are in favor of Lula. But that's like a connection political activity that is very weird, because usually when you for most people, doing public political activity in your name gets you blacklisted from jobs. But there's like this tension or ambiguity that wasn't possible in like the previous mode of political communication. And I think what Rafael said, there's like in the case that was investigating the Soberana Discord and the split of the Soberana Discord, it's like something very. It's like a repetition of the example of the McDonald's workers' resistance. It's like you can find 500 Maoists in Brazil in the same group, and all they do is read Mao and be together in a Discord server. There's like 500, 600 Maoists that know a lot, that read. That's like a relationship to ideology that wouldn't be possible. And that wouldn't be, you couldn't think like a Maoist. Who is a Maoist in like that I know of? Usually they would be people that were in Maoist parties, but now it is possible for you to like congregate with other Maoists and feel like you're doing something, but in the end you're living your life and doing like, I don't know, role play or something. I'm not sure if it's so bad, but I think there's something to consider about like the implications of this kind of possibility of like being like I'm a communist, I'm a Maoist, I'm whatever, and what do I have to do? It seems like the internet this infrastructure confuses things a bit. Like I think this diagram by Gabriel is very helpful to like the double mediation. I think I wanted to say that, but the drawing made it much clearer.
Well, you did say it, so points to you. But can I just propose that the other thing I thought, which is about the case studies, because I think that Rafael raised this point about, well, there is a reduction, right? But just go back to another aspect of the diagrams we created. If you like, these are the ones you mentioned, right? In these two, if you look at them, the way we first wrote them was just with what we call the action arrow. So, for example, here, the individual agent acts, right? Line 2 on the mediation acts on the world, the individual acts on the world. And then there is the reaction, which is a dotted line backwards, right? But in the complete version of it, which I just added here, if you look at it, we had 3 lines, right? So you act, you are constrained, and then we're not sure, we never discussed this, but we just added this idea that this implies a reduction. You learn about the world by the distinction between how you act and how it resists. So that there is, and this was called a reduction, right? What's the difference between the reduction, which always happens in the case of an emancipatory mediation and in the case of a reactionary mediation, is that when you invert the rules, the action and the reduction goes in the same direction. Whereas in the emancipatory, they go in the inverse direction. So in an emancipatory situation, you act in the party, it resists because it has other commitments, and you learn something. Okay, so the world is different because when we try to, do this, and create this protest, the police appears and resists us. So this is important to the police. They don't want us to do this. So between the resistance and the action, you get the smaller version of the world, because the police doesn't want us to protest. It's small. It's not like very complex, but it's a new reduction, right? And when you do this with the reactionary, the idea is that you resist the world is always acting on you, and you're constantly resisting. You're a reactionary, you're reacting to the world. And the way you react and the reduction go in the same direction. So it looks like it's always paired. So why am I saying this? Just because I think this helps to explain this idea here, which is not yet reactionary. I think it would be too quick to say that when the individual reduces themselves to a profile, and the world is reduced to what appears on Instagram, that reduction is necessarily reactive just because it's small. The question is it small? Is it a smaller model, like a miniature with new things, or is it a miniature with even less things, right? One thing doesn't need to be the same as the other. So I think that this is a simple idea to show that, something needs to happen to the individual to exist on Instagram. They need to become a profile. They exist through pictures. They exist through many things, right? And the world also gets reduced to whatever is photographed and written about, right? And then this is what exists inside of Instagram. I really like the first example because the guy had to make sure that this is guaranteed and people know that the picture that appeared on Instagram was from his profile and that it corresponds to him in the world, right? He tried to make this equal, and that's why he was fired. He couldn't allow it to be unequal, right? I mean, he made sure people knew that it was him. He couldn't help himself because it was meant to make everything the same. And there was something missing online, and he wanted to add an information. So he actually wanted to make Instagram richer and say, I'm smarter than you guys think, right? But there is no political anything. It's just a kind of dumb online logic where he first redoubled himself into a profile. The world is different online. And then he said, no, guys, this is not just online shenanigans. This is for real. I did it for real. And then people said, okay, so you're fired. Why am I saying this? Because then we can make a difference with this case here, which is how I think we can think about the Libs of TikTok situation and why you can be a jackass who is exactly like this guy. And you don't realize that you're actually inside of a bigger thing, right? So you can have a stupid individual who creates a profile and they follow and post and rage on Libs of TikTok, and Libs of TikTok is reducing the world to like a bigoted, homophobic world where some things are forbidden, they're wrong or whatever. And then the issue is for some people, so some people will benefit from the fact that this profile is different and that this world is different. If you ask them, why are you following Libs of TikTok? Why did you comment? They will say, yeah, I don't believe it. Like these two things here are different. But there is a reactionary movement that is based on making these two things the same. So there are individuals, not necessarily the same one, right? For whom this reduction to this profile is similar to how they will reduce outside the internet. And what is a smaller internet world becomes something they try to produce outside the world, outside the internet, right? And this requires a reactionary movement. That's why I propose that the arrow goes right. I create a profile, I go on Libs of TikTok, but there might be somebody who goes from Libs of TikTok to a reactionary movement to become this type of individual who acts on the world in this way. And this plays into the reactionary movement. So there's a difference here, and then you can collapse and create the equality. Right? Something like this, I'm not sure. And then you can make this on purpose, which is then the reactionary riot plan on WhatsApp, right? You do create a profile, like you exist as a number. And I bet some people in these WhatsApp groups, they don't go to Brasilia to take on the buildings, right? But the whole point is to create a group where the person's reduction to the profile is also forming them to create this individual at the same time. So the WhatsApp group is created by the reactionary movement, and it is also part of it. So it's not like, sometimes it's part of it. For some people, it is part of it. For some people, it is not, right? Some people will just say, no, I'm just interested in this. I'm not a reactionary. I'm just trolling. It's even a theory of trolling, this theory here, right? Trolls exist because this difference is possible. You can have an online profile that is different from you and never become this individual, and that's fine. But you're paving the way for people who do become that individual, right? Whereas the WhatsApp group for the reaction, it's for the riot, it's meant to reduce the world to this profile and for whatever is said in the WhatsApp group, and to make it so that by doing this, you engage on this, right? You become this person who then goes and tries to take something away and make the world a world without something, right? And then I was thinking it's a similar process with the couriers group, but then you can see the difference, which is the crucial one, which is the profile you become on the WhatsApp for the courier groups is already making something visible and real that usually is not real, which is your existence as a worker. So your profile is not clandestine, invisible, random protester who is I'm dissatisfied. It's a profile where you exist as a courier worker with other courier workers. So it also is meant to reflect on something you do outside, right? Just like this person here. But in this case here, you first, let's say the profile makes you exist more, right? You create a group based on that thing that you are, that others don't necessarily know you are. And the group is connected to a movement. And the more you create this reduction, the easier it is for you to become this individual who will then take the streets and create a breki, and something like this, which makes the world bigger because it makes something known that usually is not known in the world outside. Right? So this structure here, the fact that you can have a difference because it's a reduction, and you can have a difference here because it's a reduction, and then there is a question, okay, how are these two things going to connect? Are they going to be equal? Are you going to force them to be equal? Are you going to exploit the difference between the two, right? And I think that this is really interesting because TikTok pages, Facebook pages, these pages, the difference between you and your profile is different from the difference between you and your profile on WhatsApp, where something individual is preserved, right? It's meant to be a platform for work, for example. So you carry over something from the outside in, right? I don't know. I wrote a bunch of arrows. I'm not sure, like, what the fuck does this mean? I'm not sure anymore. But you get the basic point, right?
Yeah. Can I just jump in on this diagram also, because I was thinking about the endogenous reproduction thesis and how this kind of applies to these accounts as well, in the sense that there's kind of a law of attention, in the sense of like law of value thing going on, where you have some finite amount of attention and you can equate that attention with money. And so the reason you make this circuit from your profile to Libs of TikTok and then back to yourself, there's actually a way to close that circuit, which is you can actually be paid for engagement, right? Either you run this account and you are paid directly, like the whoever owns Libs of TikTok is probably making money from it, from advertising or whatever, or it can turn that into some other form of making money, even if it's not directly ad revenue. But also, like, yeah, as other people who build followings, it affects their like social reproduction. So yeah, no, that's another dimension here, that the thing that allows you to identify or to connect the profile with the individual. But it's different, right? In the case of the courier, because obviously the couriers on the WhatsApp, they're not, you can't replace your means of subsistence using WhatsApp, because you can't really build that big of a following. But so there's a difference there, right? That maybe that can explain why the difference between the individual and the profile, the relation between yourself and the profile is different in either case, because I feel like in the case of like Twitter, a big part of it is people looking to monetize that relationship. Like in the case of the security guard, right? Like what reason do you have to say, oh, I'm the one who created this photo? Because yeah, if you are famous online, you can that can lead to opportunities. But yeah, that's my idea here.
Just on what Dennis said, I think that also, Vitor, you could talk a bit about this, because we could even talk about this. There is the movement where complex social reality gets collapsed on social network, but there is also the moments where it appears all of a sudden, right? So what Dennis said has to do with this, right? So then the person makes too much of an entry because there is financial gain or status. I mean, we don't even need to say it's money. It can be just prestige. It makes people feel more dignified, right? But the Soberana situation is a good example of that, because moderators of content, which were meant to be payless, volunteer, people who are online just doing things, right? Suddenly they wanted to appear as people who are working for the Discord channel. And again, it doesn't allow anymore it to collapse. And suddenly people appear as, exploiters, people appear as bosses and workers. And it was meant to be like costlessly flat, right? You were meant to get equality for free, because we're all in it together. And then it appears again because you start working inside the online space, right?
I think if Vitor doesn't want to respond, it's Renzo.
I was thinking, sorry, Renzo can speak first, and
I was also trying my hand with the diagrams. Wait, let me just. Can I share my screen? Oh no, can I just? How does it work? Wait. Can you see the screen? Yeah, I was also trying to make sense of, because this discussion of like how on one hand things get to appear and disappear. So be it like the servers from the platforms, how you have the impression, because I think I think in a sense, like clandestine organizations also do a similar sort of like sleight of hand, where you feel as if you're having like this costless interaction. So when you like share a post or you get access, it feels costless, right? It's like this passive engagement. And a lot of like clandestine organization is also leads to this kind, like in the careers, this was clear. Like when you produce a video that goes viral, you have this impression like that you're behind the curtains, right? And people are now like sort of like enjoying something that they didn't have to work for. They're just like there. So, but I think it's clearly it's still like different things. So I was trying to make sense of this with this diagrams from, it's originally from this paper from on causal emergence. It tries to make sense. So this here is like, is basically you have like many variables which are like a micro scale with like many parts. So you can say like you have many like small parts and they interact over time. And then you can define some like macro variable, some sort of like abstraction. And then depending on the kinds of causal interactions that you're able to make, you can sort of specify whether there's emergence. So emergence would be the ability of some abstract variable to influence and not like itself in the future above and beyond what the parts can do, or of affecting the micro variables. Well, this doesn't matter. I think just the picture is evocative, but it also reminds a lot of the math thing. So I wonder if we could, I think it's incorporating this sort of like, I think there, on one hand is about like this difference in scales, on the other hand is about this difference between the material vehicle and the logical sort of function, right? So I think these two things are sort of like in tension, right? So the underlying material, which would be the micro scale. So you have like the material here and the logical function, and this is sort of like under the hood. But so you have a relation of determination here, but it's not, it might be contingent, it might not be sort of like reversible and so on. And this to say, like, I think the platform is there's this concept of, I don't know where it comes from, but I got it from the book of the workers without work without workers, maybe. No, the Adam Benanav book. But he talks about like the above the API and the below the API. The API being the interface, right? And with platforms, you have this sort of like scission between what appears above the API, which is the interface to the users, and what sort of like underlines the interface. So the servers, the contracts, like the company, the workers, that's all work done below the API. And the thing is, only when you have problems there, you get to see how it works. But from the point of view of the user, you don't get to interact. So there's no way that, so I think another way to think is that this doesn't commute. You don't get to interact this and recover your interaction with the user, right? Users just interact without seeing what's under the hood. So you have this relation, which is like, it determines what's under hood, determines exactly what the interface is, but you cannot recover this content. Like it's, and that's why I think Gabriel, like the thing here is like where it forgets stuff, because there are many arrows here and you cannot recover them by interacting with the interface, because this is very high dimensional and this is very poor. Like it has very poor interactive capacities. So you get the impression, and this is like costless almost, like it just costs your attention, and this is very costly, but it's hidden. So there's this difference in scale and so on. And this is public and this tends to be private, right? And there's a sort of analogy, I think, with how political collectives work. Like it has its internal functioning, which is costly, and an external. So this is also mapped, I think, with the interior. And here's like the boundary and so on. And I think here you have less of a break. Like, of course, it's the clandestine part is the ability to sort of like protect the sort of inner workings, and such that workers can get the newspaper in a sort of like seamless way and get the information they need. But I mean, with physical newspapers, someone had to hand you in, right? So you kind of like, there's something going on. Like you get the newspaper, but there's stuff going on, and if you know the person, you can get involved and so on. So I think there's also the fact that here there's the functions tracks like parts of the world that you can interact with, like someone handed you in. And so I think that how much the functions tracks material parts that you can sense is also a measure of how much this decouplement, this sort of like alienation is working. So yeah, but I just wanted to know if you guys think it's also it makes sense, because I think also this public secrecy division is sort of like rebounded in a sort of like different way in platforms where you have, yeah, in this case, this is like part of the social world, like this is bad, and this is like our organization. So it's, but I think there's also, yeah, this abstraction is a different thing. I think I'm not sure how to like differentiate these two things, but I think it's related to the fact that you cannot even if you want to sort of like recover information and such that this commutes. Yeah.
Vitor still in Nazaré mode. So I'm just gonna, while Vitor is thoughtfully reflecting, I'll just comment two things. First, I think this is a really good diagram, this new one. I would just think that the distinction, it could be like, because for once there's a something that's different in the newspaper one, which is the person, they can seamlessly transform into militants. So it seems that that is what seems to allow, in some sense, maybe, the person can become a militant more easily than the user can become a worker. So I think there are a lot of discussions involved in how the modes interact in this structure, that I think it's like a really good thing to fine tune, because it also, I think, helps. It seems like an excellent zoom in into the infrastructure of the differentiation between profile and individual identity. So I think this is fucking awesome. And I think this is something that we should not let go. I just wanted to comment on something that I think is relevant also, because now that this has been drawn on, and I think that the work on the ethnographic material seems to back this up in a sense. I was very much wondering because it's very weird. I was thinking first, I was thinking mostly on the do we have a name for like the social mediation diagram? We need a name like the monster. But I was thinking on the social mediation diagram, and then but when we got to the infrastructure of the boundaries between the pyramid, yes, please, it's a pyramid scheme. And then I was looking, but then when Renzo put up the the boundary infrastructure, it really cleared something for me, which in a sense seems to be the fact that this does not seem to be simply a communication mediation only in the sense of, of technical means of communication, of internet, newspapers, or whatever. It seems that with a little fine-tuning, the process of understanding what is an emancipatory collective, or a collective that is not emancipatory, also gets a bit clearer, because we could very well maybe see that in a platform party, the users participate. The user, I'm laughing at the pyramid scheme, revolutionary pyramid. You could take, like, for example, a party could be platformed if there is like this forgetful abstraction that is fundamental for the reproduction of that mediation. So this got me thinking that in a sense, it might be even possible to understand that the difference of construction, you know, the difference between, which is the difference between the individual and the social mediation, whether it's a reactionary mediation or it's a emancipatory, could also be visible when we see the possibilities of the boundaries connecting. And I'm wondering, but that, I think that would be a larger pyramid scheme, or we would have to locate the boundaries in the larger pyramid scheme and not in the reducted pyramid scheme, because it seems that in a sense, one thing that for me is becoming more and more fundamental, even if it's not something as clear, is this division between the profile, the individual, and the individual plus. It really got me thinking about virtue ethics, because in a sense, virtue ethics is like, it's profile ethics in a sense. Like, you know, it's perfect for the internet. It does not seem to me a happenstance that people are talking. No people are talking about virtue ethics, but it seems not surprising, because in a sense, to act in a virtue ethics settings, it's more about changing yourself through the occupation of certain roles, so assuming certain profiles, than simply, you know, doing the right rules or calculating the better gains. So what appeared to me is that, like, if the profile is a sort of role that you occupy, and I was wondering also, Gabriel, when you did the last one of the social mediation diagrams, you know, Renzo, could you put it on the last one? Thanks. The difference between the reactionary movement and the career strikes movement, was there like a partial identity between profile and individual? Because from what I got, like, one of the main issues in the individual and the profile in the libs of TikTok or the reactionary profile seem to be the fact that this certain profile, it's not necessarily referenceable in your individual. So, you know, oh, I just follow these guys, I don't have anything to do with this. And then when you blink, you are, you know, the liberal of TikToker. And so it seems like that there's a tendency for a differentiating between the profile and the individual, but at the end, this scheme, it puts the profile, the profile enters into a machine that produces the reactionary subject in a way, you know, it reduces him to the profile. So that's what I was thinking on the left side of the movement. On the right side of the movement, it seems that the equality, and this is something that I know, you know, maybe this will not have any meaning, but I really like the idea that there is, at the first moment, a type of equality between a profile and individual, even if that backfired in some cases. It does seem that the profile is not disconnected from the individual. I wonder if this has any meaning, because it seems like becoming a profile, you know, becoming a profile in that setting is like, you know, you're taking on the role of a militant in a sense, but the militant profile is not a profile that is reducing, you know, it's actually something that is fueled by the individual plus, and not something that produces the individual minus. I don't know. I'm just rambling a bit here, but it really, really got me thinking, because when we see, and just to finish before I ramble too much, when we see those online groups, there's this weird stuff where it seems like there's a make or break situation where the person like pretends to be a commie, and then he actually, does stuff, starts participating, starts organizing with other people. And there's like also the point where you just like feed off this internet speech when it, you're like your militant profile is reduced to that specific discussion sphere. So I don't know, I think there's this in the first sense, I think it's like the it's more akin to the newspaper infrastructure that Renzo drew. But in the other, since you're being reduced to being simply someone who produces more speech on the internet, it seems you're like user one connected to user two without being able to interfere in the platform. I don't know. I think there's a lot of confusion, and Michael got more confused. So I'm sorry. But I'm used to confusing Michael, so I'm fine with that also.
Just reading Michael here, and I'm going to say something.
I just wanted to say that I love the formal subsumption theory and real subsumption theory of trolling.
Yeah, I think what Michael is saying is very important. It's like I was thinking about what Gabriel was saying about the difference, and there's like it may be a bit, but like in a real movement, when you're like in a political movement, there is usually a difference between like what people see you as publicly or your profile and what you are actually doing. So like Hazel said, when a newspaper arrives in a place or you're with the newspaper, and people ask, who made this newspaper? What's going on? Depending on the level of trust you have in the person, generally you say, I don't know, I just got this paper, someone brought it to me. And if you do that, like in a workplace, people will say, this person is not stupid. He will not like fall to any provocation. I can see that if I like take this paper and say the same thing, there's like the difference between like what is the profile and what appears in the action is a positive, in the sense that it conveys collective organization. There's something that's bigger than me, which relieves me of like taking the risk personally. And in the case of the reactionary movement, this difference, it appears as hypocrisy, in a sense that like you say the word must be like that and we must act like that, but in reality it is not like that. You are not like that, and that's like negative. And I'm not sure if I'm very clear, but I think we can like locate a bit if something is reducive or reductive, more like if it's like diminishing the world or amplifying it by like seeing if there is this game of authenticity or versus impact in a sense. Because for example, in the careers groups, they were like people would be very aggressive in like being someone that is important within the group, within the organization, but when the break happened, it was something without leaders, something no one here is responsible, everyone is responsible, and that difference is positive. It's not like I'm lying, I'm being deceptive. Like, yeah, I am being deceptive, but you know, I think maybe that would like be a way of thinking about it. And I was thinking about this question of labor. It is something that is like common in like these left efforts in organizing online and companies of the Silicon Valley, that like the labor that Renzo said is like invisible. It appears like in a crisis. So like it happened in the case of Soberana, the moderators were doing work without like a moral payment that was worth it. So they like did a strike, and then it became apparent that behind the server with like 20,000 people, there were 8 to 10 people who were working 24/7. But it's like the same thing happened when Reddit did a strike and Substack Flow, like the programming platform, did a strike too. They showed outside that there was like a lot of labor in the stuff that people were going there to consume. So maybe there is like something common in the left and the world, the capitalist world in general. And something that Michael said, that it's like that relates a bit to what Dennis said too about this. It's like when you are organizing something collectively or in labor, a scandal involving you personally usually like blows up any chance you have of continuing your organizing work. But in the internet, it's the opposite. A scandal is good for you. The more the scandal is explored, the more you get opportunities or financial return. Maybe I was looking like at the security guard in TikTok, and he had like 66,000 views in his videos before this thing. And after he was fired, he would like get 1.5 million views on his videos. So he like 10, 30 times more views and a bit of like return. That I think it is peculiar to these platforms, like that this is possible, and when people try to apply it to other situations, it becomes problematic.
John, goes first. I think you were before.
All right. Sure. So yeah, just I was thinking about what something Raphael said in relation to trying to like kind of hone in a bit on the modes. And I think maybe another way to cash out the difference, kind of using that idea is, you know, besides the infrastructure of producing the paper, just the very act of, you know, giving a paper was much closer to the logic of a gift, where you're attempting to kind of determine a boundary, like a kind of ideological, political boundary. And I think when you are able to determine those kind of boundaries, you begin to leverage the kind of intelligibility that Renzo pointed out in his like topological analysis of the school occupation, which kind of required a notion of boundary in order to be able to kind of differentiate itself from the inside and outside. And you could build cells inside of factories using the newspaper as almost like a probing device, a perturbation device, to see like what happened. And that even kind of jives with the notion of closed sets being kind of like taken to the limit under intersection. You're always asking the question of like, who are you closest to? Who is your cadre? Who is your like most committed or pure comrades? Whereas in social media, you have the kind of homogeneity of attention reaction. You are in much more like the logic of competition and open sets, and you're always exchangeable for someone else. You can be like, someone else can be liked in your stead. Someone else will be getting the attention in your stead. And so instead of kind of having this effect where you're trying to test the inside and outside, you end up kind of having to ask the question instead, like, how wide is your overall reach? And open sets are, you know, extended through unions and can go forever. So you're always asking the question of like the reach of your influence. And you're always asking the question of like, how is your content going to work as against the other folks on your media platform? So in a way, like, I think a lot of the infighting on social media is just almost an extension of the kind of competition you see in markets and mode see all the time. It's competition over the actual like limited resource of people's time. And so in a weird kind of way, even leftism gets sucked back into a pervasive form of mode C. And that doesn't mean that's inherently bad. I mean, obviously, I used to be in one of those dogmatic Trotskyist groups that was still peddling newspapers in the 21st century, and it's sad. So like there's a certain kind of issue with that, but that's not just about newspapers versus social media. Part of it's like what Victor originally highlighted, which is the clandestine, right? Like one way to ask this question is like, what does it mean to use social media in like Saudi Arabia, for example, right? Where you have social media, but it's clandestine. And at the same time, what does it mean to run a newspaper in a liberal democracy where, you know, you're not criminalized, you're just flooded out by all the other stuff, right? So I think that there's like this interesting axis between like the media, but also the costs vis-a-vis the state, which would be the third kind of dimension of all of this, that I don't think either one of the two has a say in, which is like the mode B of like, what are your actual rights to access media or put out media in the first place?
Yeah, I totally agree with this last part about the secrecy, the difference between clandestines and open organizations.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to say also that I think connects to this, because we can connect all this discussion back to our own work, you know, because I mean, I agree with, I was even trying to do something here on the side, but I agree with what Renzo said. I think that this idea of, you know, both secrecy and, you know, the difference between coding and infrastructure versus the user experience, that those differences between, let's say, what's inside and what's outside, or what's below the surface and what's above the surface, I think it has a lot to do with the reason why this collapsing or this kind of flattening of social world appears on social network, which in my opinion is enough to say that it is not a social tool most of the time. Like it can accidentally be social, but you can't tell what's the mode of an interaction, right? I mean, a funny thing we discovered recently, technically, is that there is a nice way of discussing all the logical modes we talk about based on the fact that they're all ways of dividing graphs. And using graphs to talk about networks is like the bread and butter of it, right? So you can flatten all these divisions between, I agree, I talk to Vitor, Vitor talks to Fernanda, talks to Rafael, but what is the inside and who is outside? And what is the content that is going to distinguish? Because ultimately, since everything was flattened, it's only the content that is going to, and who talks to who, that is distinguishing what mode we're talking about, right? So for example, we can have a social space, social network space, where every time somebody disagrees, nobody talks to them anymore. It's like clear cut, right? They're outside. Or you can have a space where, you know, it's meant to be a place of debate, but we have a common agreement. So even when we disagree, there's still a common part between us. Or there can be a space where we're constantly exploiting how many connections we manage to make. And the bigger the amount of connections, the more value we can get, because we can influence people or you can get paid for it and so on. And that's mode C. But they're all based on the same thing. There is no compositional dimension that is changing. The only thing that is changing is something that is hidden below the surface, right? So you can be doing for one reason and then changing and now do the other, because it's just connections of the same quality, right? Where it's very different. If you're meeting people on the street, then building an organization, then, you know, facing some specific legal issue, like those things have, the quality appears in the compositions that are made of different things. But so I agree that there is this, I think the flattening has a lot to do. This is what the technology is made to do, right? And it is ultimately a capitalistic thing, because flattening logics to then at the right time monetize it, that's what even factories are like. You put everyone on the same, you remove differences, people cooperate, people create affinity, people create protocols, rules, and so on, and then you extract surplus from it, right? So flattening in a partial order, blah, 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 lattice, and then ordering it to get a surplus is in itself a very important aspect of mode C. But why am I saying that this connects to us? Because, for example, in the case of the courier, why is it different? And why is WhatsApp perhaps an interesting thing compared with other things? Because you can't really create an all-purpose WhatsApp group. It's so fragile a network. It's so weak in a certain sense, right? It's not, you can't like post memes and then talk to many people and then quote, retweet, and then share. It's just too weak. So you end up compartmentalizing because you need a way to add structure. And when you add that structure to WhatsApp, you end up segregating modes and segregating, you end up composing things. Whereas on Twitter, you don't need to do any of that. Everything is always already every mode in a flattened way. And part of the fun is finding out what's going on. That's what people are excited about, interpreting text and finding out, is he my friend or an enemy? Is this a rule that we need to abide and then kick people out? Or is this something I can monetize and become famous? Like, you're constantly changing modes, right? It's a technology made for that. So why am I saying this? Because for some reason we ended up on WhatsApp, right? And I think for some reason, one way you can make online mediations more like the journal, in the sense that they have real constraints that are passed along, and we can feel those constraints and we can interact with them and see them, is because we start creating separate WhatsApp groups inside the big WhatsApp group. So you start constructing structure inside the social network, right, to separate and abstract in different ways material. So we have groups for projects that are based on consensus and common affinity. Then you have groups for order and rule and voting and so on. And you have groups to debate, you know, and you add the central admin. Suddenly now the fact that there is work to be done to maintain all of this is also on the surface. And these things are not meant to necessarily match, but they're all there. In negotiating with that complicated platform is also making a lot of stuff about the world appear, right? You need to face a battle of how to be a communist in all of those different domains separately a bit. Just because you created an affinity project with people you like doesn't mean you're involved in maintaining the platform, doesn't mean you're, you know, abiding to the collective's rules. So I think that there is a very practical lesson also in this idea of, you know, if there is something about the online world that it's seductive because it flattens everything and makes you lose information, it's not, I think that, as I understood everyone's comments, we shouldn't just assume that this is, let's say, a destiny, and therefore we should never do online politics. Even the Soberana example as Vitor was saying, there's good things there. I mean, it's not like it's just a blob of confusion. So I think that we can even take a politics for ourselves from that, right? That there is something about online behavior that makes some differences. It's not that they disappear. You just cannot tell what difference matters when. And no wonder they increase noise and makes people more prone to confusion and to fighting and to fantasizing about others because you don't know what's the important thing. And it's been an idea we've had for a long time. Renzo worked on this. I worked on this. John worked on this a long time ago of creating, like, what would be a platform that respects the different structures of political organizations that you can actually interact with them. We used to call it tech talk because it's technological. Renzo did a really cool presentation on this, like was the first presentations we did on STP, in fact. But I think that intuition, yeah, that happens. That intuition is still here, right? That if you want to go against this, I mean, the Courier strike is doing this organically because it's better than inventing this from the ground up, is finding online tools that are already being abstracted in the shape of a struggle, right? They are already taking the form of a struggle. They have the cost and the constraints built inside of them. You don't need to pretend. So people already use the Courier group on WhatsApp to share information that is relevant to their work. Well, you're now just pushing the boundary and saying, yeah, there's other information that is relevant to your work, like injustice and fairness, and the fact that everyone here feels the same. It's the shortest path to that. And if you were to do the same thing on Twitter, you would lose power because you wouldn't be knowledge, because you wouldn't be able to tell if people are complaining because they're trolling, because they want to make friends, because they want to virtue signal, because they are engaged, right? So the small group in a more fragile platform actually helps, right? And I think in our case, it's a more artificial thing, but it's a similar idea that you create groups and you try to separate things so that the thing that happens inside that group, you can tell what difference makes a difference there rather than others, right? And you can recuperate a bit of that information. So it doesn't require you to become a coder and go below the API, right? And actually, but in a certain sense, going below the user, the interface and the user interface can simply mean building structure that's relevant to a political process, right? And I was also trying to do this, but I think it doesn't work. If anyone wants to try their hand at class composition of different social networks, I was thinking like you would put this up like this. Right? Kawaii is very lumpen. It's very mode C. You're paid to be there. You're an influencer, but it's like a TikTok without the veil of any level of social status or something. Then I think WhatsApp also has a very mode A thing about it, right? It always abstracts to small communities where you need to share something, otherwise you're not in the group, right? I think Facebook has a similar thing, but it's the groups are closed, they're like small condominiums, right? Something like this. It's different in that sense, perhaps.
Don't you think like the fact that Facebook and Instagram are, and you didn't even put Instagram.
Oh, I forgot about it, yeah.
They seem like to be selling platforms, the ones that really worked it out in the best sense. And they are actually like the same owners, so right now. But I do think that this aspect is central to Instagram and to Facebook.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to do this, but I was just thinking if there, if we can go further in this examination, like why are libs of TikTok? Why is TikTok the place? Why is not WhatsApp? Or Twitter the best place? And why, will workers end up appearing on WhatsApp and Quai to organize, and Facebook even to some sense, rather than others? Like, is there something in the structure of the platform that is relevant for these things, or is it just? Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's class only indirectly through function, right? Not sure if you guys want to try your hand at this. I think this thing here is totally wrong. I don't know. It's too simple, but there's definitely something about, that thing we were talking in the meeting. I was presenting on stuff on nature, and we were talking about there are natural phenomena that are conductive to a social logic more than others. The same is valid for network structure, I think. If you post more images, if it's something that allows you to create groups, if it is, a place where there is a specific type of connection that you need to have there, or if you can have any type of connection. Yeah, I agree. I think everything will be A, B, and C. But I think John was right with probably there's a matter of function that makes these things, like Quai, you're paid to be there and to get more people inside. And some people even, being an influencer is almost a consequence of wanting to get paid, versus TikTok, where you can start as an influencer because you think you have something to say, or, yeah, but I don't know. Just throwing it out there in case we want to do a monster diagram with social networks. That would be good. The other thing I also wanted to mention that goes back to a previous point, and I wonder, I think it has to do with the cost and function thing we were talking about, is that there's something specific about how there are two ways in which social media can connect with political movements, right, to that upper region, because there is I think it was Travessia, they left already, but they mentioned this, that I think it's a crucial point also about address, right? Social media, it creates the impression that you're addressing everyone. And so, for example, the endogenous reproduction, the idea that you can get trapped into this circling, spiraling debate that has no real existence, but it feels like there is because people respond to you. It's almost as if the upper line, right, that goes here, like this, right? It's as if there is something like this, right? There is Instagram as in your profile, your network here. So it's like a personal Instagram. And then there is Instagram as a whole space. And it feels like when you post here, you're actually posting to everyone, but you're not. You're just posting to this, right? So it's like there is also reduction here. You feel like there is this idea of everyone who is here, which is just an imaginary thing. And it's reduced this way as well, right? It's actually this line here, right? This is meant to be everyone. And it's reduced to something which is actually just Instagram. But you think you're talking to more people than you are. So, for example, you can make an amazing remark on Twitter about the needs of the revolutionary, and you feel you already talked to the movement by talking to that space, right? So, for example, libs of TikTok, you can have something like this, where this is what actually happening. This is the reduction that happened. from everyone to this smaller space, but this is not the same as this connecting to the movement that it's outside, right? And I think that the smaller networks, they're better with that. Like WhatsApp, it's better with this because it doesn't create the idea you're talking to everyone. So if you want to talk to more people, you actually need to go outside. That is clearer here, right? That there's a boundary here you need to cross, and therefore a boundary here you need to cross. Whereas on Twitter, it's like you're an individual, you create a profile, you talk to Twitter, and you feel like that this reduction here from the world to the smaller world that exists on Twitter, you feel like you're already talking to everyone. You already said your piece. You already talked about what you had to talk. So the idea that there's something other here that is outside and that it has some relation to what you're doing and so on, this is kind of disappears, right? Something like that too. I'm not sure how to add it here, but I feel like it's also relevant to this.
All right, this is me attempting. I tried to write out like several times a response to Raphael's question about age divisions on social media being explainable by work social compositions, and I couldn't. So this is going to be kind of rambly because I couldn't come up with something concise. But and relates to something I've been like thinking about for a long time and have been kind of starting to re-articulate in terms of STP work, but just kind of the relationships. And this all goes back to actually some work by Michael Kafensis, who works with like Silvia Federici in the PM Press world. But he proposes someplace treating computers with the logic of the machine analysis from Capital, which goes a really long way on a lot of levels. But I think also challenges a certain level, like the question of the specific role of technology in how people are participating in what they're doing. And I think like TikTok's a very good example. And I remember seeing a little commentary that kind of elaborate the difference, that Gen Z can tell millennials, or at least they could, maybe like people are hiding it better, but as millennials began to enter the TikTok platform, Gen Z could tell because millennials would hesitate a second before starting to talk on the videos, whereas Gen Z, like, they're talking the moment they're pushing the record button. And so there's this slight literal kind of like behavioral, almost physiological kind of shift in like the relationship that people are like close to technology and how they're using it. And I think that especially with this bizarre thing called computers, like, it really is an interesting place for us to explore in terms of STP, like what it means when we have kind of extended the weird world of machines that Marx begins to analyze in The Factory to every corner of our lives. And so that's all to say that, yeah, like I agree that ultimately, yes, you could explain the different ages on the different social media platforms by work social composition. But I would say that that would require an emphasis on the material technical kind of study on the kind of material interactions with technology as that changes. The difference between typing on the computer, I mentioned earlier, like organizing during the anti-globalization period, which was before Web 2.0, and you actually had to know some kind of stuff to use the computer a lot of times, required a lot of different kind of costs. To now with, you know, smartphones and video recording. And so I think like kind of like what Gabriel said in here about, or Raphael said in here about each mode appearing in each network. So we kind of basically, we can't just, we have to do the work of kind of analyzing each particular system and finding where the modes come up. I think in the same kind of way, we have to use our theory to try to figure out, especially in the pyramid scheme, what role technology plays in the various arrows and how it renders things intelligible and how it like kind of connects us all. So anyway.
Well, I was just thinking about what Gabriel said here, and that's like the situation where people like talk to the world, and what does it mean? Like, and I was thinking like based on the like the João Bernardo text, it was like it's like the worst of the true of publicity and secrecy, because you like you are talking to people who won't necessarily do anything about it. So it's like it's you're getting to people you do not like know or control. And on the other hand, you are like they are all searchable platforms. So you are producing a trail of who you are, and if you actually do something that goes against anything, they can like know everything about you and retroactively like track you and what kind of people, what kind of stuff you said, and with who you were against, who you're in favor. So there's like the eh, pessoal, the, the guys in Passa Palavra, they have like a position that this habit of like talking about everything is a bit antithetical to any effort, future effort of organization too, because it's like you're giving more information about uh, yourself and the people around you to like in a naive, a bit naively. I mean, it makes it harder after that to not do that. If you're like used to share everything all the time, like to have an habit of sharing something to specific people and not sharing other stuff, it becomes harder. So I think it probably produced some like this crisis in PCB. I think there's a lot of estrangement between generations around that, because people have like they do not find it so hard to share stuff that happened inside the party to people outside, and that makes things harder in the end. Yeah, and law enforcement and other stuff, they have access to information that people do not, and researchers, and so there's it's like uh, a friend used to say that that's like you make if you make a live of a meeting, it's like you're sharing your meeting. Instead of having the police come to your meeting infiltrated, you're sharing a camera with like and recording it for future inspection for the police in the future. See, I don't think that's paranoid. That's law enforcement and social media work very closely. But I think people end up trusting like there's so much stuff online that people won't notice me. I think people trust like in the flood of irrelevancy in a way.
What is happening?
I think we're done, maybe. Anyone wants to?
One thing I would say just to conclude perhaps is that like to go back to the previous point, right? I think what we want to get out of all of this is, again, it makes no sense to create a value judgment about what everyone should do or shouldn't do, but perhaps a clearer sense of how to decide strategically depending on what you're doing. Of course, let's say if your project is an educational project about Marxist content, do you need to worry about going to jail? I mean, it would be a very small concern. So you can make that choice. Like it's so less costly to organize online and to be public about it, and there's so little chance that this will turn out bad. It's such a difference that doesn't make a difference that I can pay that price, right? So something like this. So I'm just saying because I think that the point about, let's say, the Leninist point that can be recuperated behind this has something to do with, well, you need to, because the fact he also chose a journal at the time that he did is very relevant. Like if the country was totally illiterate and most militants couldn't read, probably wouldn't be a good idea. So, or if at least there was a resistance against written stuff, right? It would be a problem. So actually, a lot of people were illiterate, and teaching people to read was very important. But it was even an opportunity in a certain sense, right? But I think that the strategic discussion on all of this has something to do with, you need to find the mediation. Like if you're looking for mediations to benefit from, it's actually not necessarily a trade-off, but there are more parameters. The first parameter that I think Vitor ended up highlighting is there is a built-in problem in social networks that the cost of some things, the way that they filter differences in the world flattens a lot of things. And a lot of social networks are meant to do that. Some social networks are better or worse for that. So that's something to think about. Let's say if you do want to make more things present to people, you either need to add structure or you need to find the proper channel they already use for that issue, right? So for example, if you want to organize courier strikers, if they were using Kwai rather than WhatsApp to share places where there are blockages and things like this, probably that's where the movement should go rather than WhatsApp. It would make no sense to say, hey guys, let's create a WhatsApp group, right? So there is one sense in which you want to go with the flow, but not go with the flow in general. You want to go with the flow of that particular determination, right? Where is that determination appearing rather than in a noisy medium? The worker might be on Kwai where they do talk about their problems, but they're also sharing, trap music, and they're talking about other things, and they're watching, a lot of porn stuff and whatever. Like it's mixed. It's harder for you to separate that. Whereas perhaps the WhatsApp group, it's just work, so it's better. So there is a strategic decision of why this rather than that, which is the Leninist decision of why the journal over something else. It could have been something else, right? It could have been like groups. Let's meet and discuss. Let's meet and talk. But it wasn't. Then there is the fact that when you find a media, not a mediation in general, but a media, you are looking for something that lowers the cost of circulation, right? You want to circulate faster, or you want to get to places you couldn't. And that's also something the journal used to do. And it's mostly the reason why people, I think, choose social networks, because that particular cost was lowered in a way that it was never lowered as much before. Right? I mean, a lot of people here met because of that, because the cost of getting in contact with somebody far away went down. So there is a trade-off there, perhaps, because sometimes the cost goes so down precisely because it's flattening these dimensions. So there is a decision to be made about this, right? And for S2P, I think we already realized at some point that it's very funny that a lot of people come through the collective, but it's actually quite rare for people to stay in the collective if they never meet at least one person here. Like if you see the list of our 40 people who are in the WhatsApp group, the people who are active most, I mean, some people met only on Zoom, but Zoom is already a bit more intimate or a bit more connecting than, you know, just the media, just the WhatsApp or just Twitter or whatever, right? So there is a movement of pushing people to a more complex connection. And that seems to be present in most people who stayed. Either they met in person, they met one person outside here, or they met them in a study situation or something like this. That's very common. And then the third thing I think it's relevant is that it can be, perhaps there is the best tool is online, if you need that cost to go down, right? But it does seem that being able to turn it into something that is in between something else is very relevant for it to work for organizing purposes. Like you need to introduce at some place, at some moment, a distinction between the everyone that the online world creates, like you're talking to everyone, and the real anyone who is outside, right? So like there at some point, these two things need to be in tension, either because you're going to talk here about movements that are happening elsewhere, and we're going to bring people over who are not in our networks, or because we're going to use the network to meet outside. Like there is something like this that seems to be necessary to make these mediations, again, a bit more like the journal, because the journal does this automatically. Like you don't want to circulate the journal, you want to circulate the people, right? In the case of the journal, that's obvious because the journal cannot go where people don't go, ultimately. So this is something you need to artificially create when you organize online, because it does facilitate getting information about others and learning that something exists, but it can then create the illusion that that's the end of it. If you got the information, you're already connected, right? Or if you sent the information to everyone, you've connected to everyone. And there seems to be a necessary kind of work that is not a work that is, I mean, it's built into the journal, which is you inform and then you connect. And you need to make those two things look like they're different things. So if you talk to people on a WhatsApp group, you either create a different WhatsApp group just with that person, or you agree to meet on Zoom, or you agree to meet elsewhere. That proves that that information led to a type of connection, right? But if you allow those two things to look like the same, then you can get trapped into this idea that if you are engaging as a profile on the media, you're already connecting as individuals, right? Something like this. I think that's also something that it's present in the journal structure as a strategic tool, and it's hard to redo online. You know, it's possible, but it's something you need to care for. Like you need to look for it. Yeah, exactly. Engagement is not a social measure. Engagement, that's my point. Like it can be mode A and mode B as well, I think. Like, but this is what I think it's the difference, right? It's even a really, really good example of this. Like what makes the modes social? What makes them social is that if you follow them, you can get a picture of the world that is coherent with survival, right? It's social. It has to do with living. Engagements, they can have any logic. You're flattening, so they can be mode A, mode B, mode C. You don't know, and usually you need to turn them into a mode. So it's not true. It's always, I think, monetized. I think perhaps like prestige. Oh, I got a lot of hits on whatever I did, so now people respect what I do. They will listen to me better. Like it might not ever translate into money, John, I think, but it needs to be translated to a social logic that is outside of the engagement, and then it acquires social characteristics. Other than that, it's too incoherent to be Like you can't tell what it is, right? It's just too noisy. It's vulgar, exactly in the sense we were talking about. It's like a closed, vulgar space. You can't tell what's the value of the engagement until you connect it to something bigger outside. Like, well, I got a lot of likes. Now people are gonna come see me or become my friends, or now I got a lot of likes. I can make money out of it and so on, right? Yeah, exactly. Because like hierarchy can be established through engagement as well, right?
And that's another good place for that idea of like costs with that mention, what you mentioned, Victor, with all the moderation is we tend to look at like that kind of world of protocols as something that's like ready made, and yet it requires like enforcement and administration and stuff. So that's
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, man, this is really cool stuff.
Ah, yeah, I was having difficulty to make it make sense, but that was good. Thanks, everyone. It was
it's
great
really
to
great. I
write.
think when people bring stuff like in formation like this, I think it was Michael that brought one like last year or so on like nationalism that really like brought up a lot of questions that became really fruitful for a long time. So I think we should encourage more of this kind of in process presentation. It was really
Totally
good.
agree. Cool.
All right, then. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Victor.
Thank you,
Valeu,
man.
Michael.
Yeah, thank you so much, Victor.
Abraço, pessoal. See you all.
Abraço.
Tchau,
Bye, bye.
gente.